And I'm live. That is cool. Today is 16th of February 2026, Monday. And with that, let's pick. And it is Monday. Yep. I didn't mess up. Cool. Yep. And now we can actually begin the work. Yesterday, I did some commits. I added linting. Yep. Yesterday after the stream, linting. And you will see here that I changed 800 lines, which is like because the space, the indentation changed for every single file. And yep, that made that like 800 lines change. And now the indentation has changed from 8 spaces to 4. Shit, from 8 to 4. It's cool, which is pretty cool. And there is a new command here, run lint for linting, which finds errors and mistakes, and bun run format, which formats stuff. So if there is someone else who is trying to make a commit to this, and if their indentation is different from the indentation that is being used here, then they can just run this command and have that indentation work. So yep, that is a cool thing. And yep, so now we have to work on the gameplay itself. But the thing is, like here, these functions have to be given. Shit. Okay, that is a bit messed up. These functions here have to be given right here. Like, yeah, I thought maybe when there is a way to play a game, we can maybe call some other function that will take the WebSockets for those two people and play the game with them. But that is not the case. We have to say that if a message is received on this endpoint, create game endpoint, this is what must be done. Yep. So I guess we can create another endpoint, which is not this, but shit. No, cool. We can create another endpoint. And I think if there is a connection which is running, we can just change this create game to game run start game run dot ts. And I would like to change the name of this thing. Shit, that is just game run. Means the name of this thing. Game start, and APIs would error not yet, but game start, cool, and yep, game start. Yeah, cool. And I also added a few comments, which I will have to like I will add throughout the whole file later on. And we can remove this. Cool. And then game run here, both game create plugin or game create plugin. I think it's fine. Game create plugin is fine, I think. And yep, message. If a message is received, then console.log the message and the host of send back. Send the message back. And now we will see if this works. Run the backend, and it is screen not stuck. Unstuck. Postman. So we will localhost, and yep, one more thing is I want to change the time limit helper keys dot js gwt dot json time limit. There is no time limit now. Cool. So if we log in once, it will just keep working on. Cool. This is the thing. And if you go here, game create, instead of create, let's say run. Shit, this is still create. Run and headers. Another wired thing. We are not shit, not this, but this. Okay. And this still has these things, and it's connected 404 unexpected. Yes, I think therefore we have to first create a connection. Connection is created, and shit, we cannot change this. Okay, so yep, so that just means message will also come in the same endpoint. There won't be multiple endpoints. There will be a single endpoint handling everything. Game run would be the name, and delete this game start. Yep, we have to add message here. Console.log message and ws log and message receive. Message receive, which is message stop, run, connect, and error. Because create does not exist. Run is the thing that exists. Okay, and this is running. And if we mark, if we send our message, we do get it on the server, my message, and here message received, my message. Good. So we can communicate with the server, and we just have to fill up this message thing. Okay. Handle incoming moves, handle connection closing, and here handle connection starting. Okay. Message. Yep. Message. So when a client, a socket which is right now connected, sends a message, first of all, we do know that the connection was established and there was no problem with the connection. Like here, we wouldn't be here if these things were not given. So, yep, connection would be refused if the input was wrong. So that is cool. So we do know that the connection is valid. What we do need to check is this current player in a match or not? And if this current player is in a match, then with whom is this current player with a match? So what we need is, using the ID of this player, we need to get the WS object, the WebSocket object of the other player, and vice versa. Using the user ID of that other player, we should be able to get the WebSocket for this current player. So we will have to have a update in our memory. Shit, that looks horrible. No, shit, that does look horrible. It is fine now. Okay, this needs to have some other things here. Static variables define before and we have a user. We need another map. And what would the type of that map be? It would be export type of, yep, user I this thing maps user ID to WebSocket, user ID to WebSocket. Excalibur. We need a way to map user ID to WebSocket of the opponent. And we already have a logic to remove a WebSocket from the queue if the WebSocket closes. But what would we do if the WebSocket closes in while inside a game? Right. So if that happens, should we have the ability that the user can connect again, continue the game where they left off? I guess not. Mm, we should have it, but right now let's just get things done. So right now, if a WebSocket closes during a game, then the opponent who didn't close their WebSocket wins the game. Right, so that would be cool. Yep, that is cool. That is cool. The opponent will win the game. So what we need is a way to know the WebSocket for the opponent given the user ID of the current player who just made a move, so that we can, using this WebSocket, tell the other player what this current player, what move was made by this current player. And also, if someone closes their WebSocket during a game, then also we need to get the that user ID. Nope. We need to get the user ID and WebSocket of the other player, so that we can tell this other player that you have won the game. And then we do our stuff about updating the database. Okay, so we need to get the WebSocket using a user ID and WebSocket using another WebSocket. Can we just store them in a map? Is it optimal though? Storing this is fine, there is no problem, because things are passed by reference in JavaScript. I just saw today, so that is cool. And storing this connection, storing this connection, I think, is not very cool. But what is cool is, uh, here we can have the WebSocket as the key that is complete. Wait, no, wait. Okay, what we can have is, we can have a data structure where user ID maps to some other user ID, which is that this user ID 1 is having a match right now with this user ID 2. That is cool. And also the opposite. This is a bit redundant, but this is fast. UID 1. That is fast. And we will have this, and we will also have UID 1 maps to WebSocket of this user 1. And this is helpful because when we have the user ID of the current person, through this we can find the user ID of the opponent, UID of the opponent, and through this second list we can find from the user ID of the opponent the WebSocket of the opponent, and that is cool. And for the vice versa, when we have the WebSocket and we want to find the WebSocket of the other opponent, since this WebSocket itself has user ID in its headers, here if we do ws dot data dot user dot user ID, here the user ID um okay, so ID I is capital. So user ID does exist on the user WebSocket. So from the WebSocket, we can get the UID, and when we have the UID, we can get the user ID of the opponent, and when we have the user ID of the opponent, we can find their WebSocket through this second list. So we just have to add two more lists to our data structure. That is cool. Type um, type user to opponent is a map of string to string, and okay, and here export type user to opponent, uh, user ID to object, user opponent, and user ID to web socket, a map between string and Elijah WS. Good. My database start game run here in APIs game start app is good. So here we need to add static user opponent user opponent equals an empty list no a map. This would be a map string to string or just a map. Because this way, this is not web and static user ID to web socket type user ID WebSocket class map. Now we need to add getter function and remover function, adder function to these things for these things. Hello, you bro. Listen to this. My Omarki got corrupted. Boot error. Had to reinstall the OS. Shit. Okay. One another thing. How does how do things keep breaking? That is sad. I built a new team with Rust. Will you start and read my article, please? Yes, I will. It is called Oracle. Yep, I saw that. Oracle. I have not read the thing, but I saw it. Saw the article. Shit. It comes at the top. That shit. How is this thing coming at because of this specific project? With GitHub, okay, Yasani is a okay. Google knows about you. Yasani is a software developer and open source contributor known for building various projects using a range of technologies using AI, ML, C, C++, Rust, React, and Angular. He shares his work and learnings on platforms like GitHub and his personal website. While the search results show an active profile and a general interest in development, there is no public repository specifically named Oracle. Okay, those are different things. Okay, yes, and it does hold a SQL fundamentals certification from SoloLearn and has experience with general software development, but no public details about a specific Oracle repository were found in the provided search result. So Google knows about you. More Google or suffered. Okay. Uh, Not right now. Right now, I'm like working on that. But yes, I will read this. This is quite a long article. I saw this in the morning. It I can give you heart. Shit, I don't have a account. Shit. That is you. That is not you, I think. But that is you. I've seen your face. And you built this using Rust. That is cool. And shit, Google knows about you. That is something pretty cool. Yep. Goes hard. Hey, I can follow you and you have the same DP here, like of course. Okay, yep. I will read this article later. And I will read this and I will like criticize you and give you tell you all the things that I do not like, which is good, right? Okay. Here, print function. User opponent and user ID of user opponent. Static user opponent. Get oppo get user opponent. This function takes in a user ID, which is a string, and returns a string. If user ID in this dot user opponent, then return this dot user opponent is not assignable to type string. Return this user opponent from user ID. Element implicitly has type any because the user opponent has no index signature. Did you mean to call get? Yes, I did mean to call get because this is a map set string or it could be undefined. Okay, this could return undefined. Result is this dot user opponent dot get or this user ID. Okay, also string or null. If the user does not exist. So if return null, then but if rest is not equal to undefined, return false. User opponent static um, is user playing. This takes in a user ID string boolean return user ID in return this dot user opponent dot and user ID. User DID or I will add all the comments at some point later in one go. Static uh, add users game add users game seems okay. Yep, still on the back end, but right now we are finally working on the user playing games. Yesterday after the stream I mm, did formatting and linting so that if different people have different indentation information or different things, they can just run the formatting command and everything will be aligned properly. And before this used to be 8 spaces, now it is 4 spaces, much better which looks much better than 8 spaces. Add user name. This thing takes user ID, which is user one ID, use string and user. Shit, how do we know who is white and who is black? Shit, how do we know who is white and who is black? Yes, how would the handler function know who is white and who is black? Hey, did you complete the chess core part or core? No. Yes, the actual gameplay part is now remaining. There have been a lot of loopholes. Like if a user is waiting in the queue and the connection closes, what happens then? And yeah, stuff like that. And what if the user does not send in correct information in the to establish a WebSocket, and a user should not be able to play a game with themselves. A user should only be able to play a single game at a single time. Yeah, stuff like that. Handling scores and setting up user matches. Yep, all of that is done. Setting up matches and now handling scores and the actual gameplay is the thing. But I think in 2 to 3 days, the backend should be okay and we can start working on the front end. It should be cool. We would be actually able to see stuff. User queue. Queue of people who are playing a game. But I guess we don't need this. We don't need this because we can just use user ID, user opponent to check if a single player is playing a game or not. Yep. And how do we know if a player, what is the color of a player? I think we can store that information in this map. This will store, yep, in this map. This will store along with Elysia WebSocket Elysia WS. This will also store color. Socket color of type color. Cool. That is cool. So we can first of all remove this. Not first. User queue. Do not add to user queue. Add game takes all of these and returns a boolean if this user is playing a game. And okay, this is for the queue. This is for the queue. Makes sense. This is for the queue. So look, this is for the queue. So yeah, this is needed. This will also be a string. Add user games. Okay. Add user game. Make these two people mm, playing game with each other. This dot user, and this can only be called if they are not playing game already. Return true if is user playing game for user 1 or this dot is user playing user 2. If any of them is playing, then return false. They cannot start playing another game while one of their game is going on. But if they are not playing any games, then this dot user opponent dot set user 1 id to user 2 id and 2. Also the opposite. So we have a function to get to get and to get to see and to set. And how do we remove users game, remove users opponent. This thing takes and this also takes in user id one, which is a string, and user to id, which is also a string. And this dot user opponent, first we will check if this dot is user playing user 1 id and this dot is user playing user 2 id. Return true at the end, returns boolean, and this has to be if this user is not playing or this user is not playing, then return false. Both of them must be playing again for us to remove them. User opponent dot delete user 1 id and delete user 2 id. Cool. That's cool. And the other data structure is user id web socket. user ID WebSocket, which maps a user ID to their respective WebSocket and the color which they are playing. Let's get user color, which takes in user ID, let's say spring. And first of all, we have to check if this user is playing. So if this dot is user playing user ID. If this user is not playing, then return null. This thing returns color or no, which is apparently messed up, but no. But if they are not playing a game, if they are playing a game, then return this dot user ID WebSocket dot get user ID dot color. So we can change this to undefined. And if we are going to do that, we can just directly return this as we were doing, as we were not doing here. Const color type color const color equals this number user ID of socket now get for user ID now color and if color equals undefined, if color is not undefined, in return color, else return no. Here also possible object is possibly non-existent, that is fine. We can get the color by which the current user is playing. And static get user color, we can get their color and we can add shit. Why would we add this thing manually? Why would we add this thing here like this? We would add this thing here afterwards like this. Yeah. Static get and set user ID socket, which takes in user ID, which is a string, and socket, which is an Elysian socket. And this thing returns a boolean. True. Okay. User ID. First of all, we have to check that this user ID already does not exist there. And also, we will take in as input color, which is of type color. If this dot user ID WebSocket dot as user ID, then return false. Else, if this does not exist, then this dot user ID WebSocket dot set. What do we set? And the key would be user ID and the value would be color and socket would be socket. Color and socket. Cool. User ID WebSocket is set, user ID and color. Cool. And we would also like to remove static get user ID socket mistakes in user ID and returns either the socket Elysia WS socket or this returns null. Return null. And if this user does not exist, const socket is this dot user ID web socket dot get user ID socket, and if socket equals undefined, if socket is undefined is not equal to undefined, that is, then return this one. Cool, that makes sense. And we need something else. I don't think so. We can get with the user ID, we can get the color, we can get the Elysia object, and we can even set delete. Delete user ID socket. This takes in user ID and string and doesn't really like do anything. This if this dot user ID socket as dot as user ID, then this dot user ID WebSocket dot delete the user with this ID. Cool. We can add and delete user ID, user Elysia objects, but there's a problem which I think will arise here in this function, because this function is saying that it returns an Elysia object, Elysia web server, WebSocket. But we expect this WebSocket to be different than the base WebSocket, because this thing also has a headers, which this thing also has a users object in the data section, which has all the properties which we will be needing, but this does not have them. So what do we do? Hmm. Okay, I guess we'll see how it goes. Now, on closing, we have to add some more things. User dot remove game if the user was not playing a game but was in the queue. So first we have to check if user if data dot user is user of what even is user. Is user queue. So if is user queue, this user ID, if this user ID exists in the queue, then this and log this has close its connection from the queue, but also if the user if the user if the user was in queue, but if the user was in a game. If the user was in a game, then what would happen? We will have to check and is is user playing? Is user playing? Is user ID? If the user was playing, when they start playing, we have to remove them from the queue. Shit, which I haven't done. My bad. Shit. If the user was playing again, then data dot remove user opponent. That is one thing that we will do. User ID. And should we have to get the ID of the shit? Okay. If this current user closes, we first have to get the ID of the other user, send them a message that you have won the game. Yep, send them a message that you have won the game. And what other information will we send them? We also have to send how much their rating was changed and other information, which they can retrieve by sending another HTTP request just after the game ends. So we do not have to convey that information through the WebSocket. Mhm. If data dot okay. If they were playing a game, then const opponent ID would be data dot get user opponent for this user ID. Get the opponent. Send the opponent a message dot ID. To send the opponent a message, we have to get their ID. We have to get their socket. Opponent socket is data dot get user ID socket given the opponent ID is not assignable to type of. Why would this be a string? Get opponent socket. Get opponent socket. Get opponent socket, and we have the opponent socket. We have to tell the opponent you have won, not like this. Final true or find it true is possibly none if opponent socket. If opponent socket does this, then ended true. And winner, who is the winner? Winner true. Winner true means that the current person is the person who is receiving this object has won the game. That is what this means. We want okay, shit, this is from before. Okay, tell the other user that they have won the game and then close their connection also to this not WS opponents not this, not this. And yep, close their connection, then remove that other user and this user from the list, which will happen inside here. Data dot remove what is game here. delete shell. This should be removed and remove opponent ID, use the opponent ID and tell the database to remove this. Yep. And then remove the socket for the current player. Remove user ID socket for this user whose ID is user ID. And then also data dot remove user opponents given user ID and opponent ID. Opponent ID which might not be defined or if the user was in a game, then do all of this. Get the opponent user ID. If ID, get their socket. Tell them that they have one. Close their socket and remove. Clean up. Yep. And in this case, remove game. What does remove game does? Remove game removes the game. Takes in all of these things and removes the user ID from game queue. And this indentation is crazy. If there is not a game running, then what does a game mean? Game queue. Queue. So this should not be remove game. Shit, this is not remove game. Remove remove queue. This is not, this should not be remove game. This should not be remove game. This should more like be remove game queue. Someone who is in the queue, remove them from the queue. Yep, remove them from the queue. Sounds more like it. And when we know that we are going to start a game, we will remove them from the queue. Data dot remove game queue for both the users, the current one and the other one. What are the arguments? Arguments required are this remove game queue user ID. User ID is available, color is available, time and increment is available, and we have to remove the opponent from this user opponent response dot opponent dot user ID, color, time, and increment are the same. Okay, okay, okay. That is what. Okay, that is working. That is working. That is working. Let's test this. Hello. How much progress is done, and are you almost done? Almost. Like you have the role of reading the backend code. So yeah. Uh, we are not all. I mean, I cannot tell right now. Right now, we can work on actually running the game. We have to just write this single function, I think. And in this single function, we are listening at some random WebSocket with some message. And as far as I can see, I have also fixed the loopholes. And also, if there is a connection between the client and the server, and if that client was waiting in a queue, what will happen then? And if the client was inside a game, what will happen then? That is also handled. The only thing remaining is the actual game logic and then saving the result of the game on the back end, and then making some other APIs which would give the front end like information about how many games a user has made and stuff like that. Yep. Yep. Let's see. Message received. Okay, let's see. Run the backend. Game run headers. This user wants to play as 2. 2 is random, I think. Yep, 2 is random. So connect. And error. Server error. Shit. Shit. Wait, maybe we didn't have the. No, we did have the int. This shit. Error is 500. 500 is bad for the backend developer. We. Shit. Well, let's log in again. Log in. Have the same JWT. Copy. Go here. Okay. Start connection. 500. Er- Server is listening. Server is listening. Server is listening. Localhost end key endpoint is also right. Game now endpoint is wrong, but run is okay. Run is okay. We are getting 500. Shit. Yep. Go here. Is there some error somewhere which is not visible to us? What is this? This is shit. Of course, I think it is because of the. It is not because of the APS. Game star dot ts, and this thing is game star dot ts. Fine. Like this start game dot ts, and there is supposedly some error here somewhere. Remove game. Close. Remove game. Okay, my keyboard is shit. All the progress is lost from this function. No, this is the wrong file. Start game. Yes, this is the wrong file. This is the wrong file. This file. Yep, this is the wrong file. This is the wrong file. Game start.ts. This is the. This is the actual thing. I think there are multiple files with the same name. Game start.ts. Memory.ts. Okay, now my keyboard is acting bad, but it's now we should be able to make a connection, or maybe not. Memory.ts. Something is happening. I cannot say what. I will test it when it will be in play. Okay, okay. You will be. Ah, shit. That is what is meant by beta tester. I think reading is of no use. I will understand. I mean, you can. You are like got big brains. Kakashi Hatake. There is something wrong, wrong somewhere, which is this. We are calling the same function twice. But that should not be a problem because we are not going inside this console.log. Hi. API, game start, game start. API, import, game, shared, game start, start game, game, run. APIs, game, run. Okay, game run the game, start, connection, disconnected, not connected, no connection, Eh, no connection. And which part is breaking? Shit, which part is breaking? Helper. Is the JWT part breaking? Here. Set expiration time was there before, but then I removed it. Maybe 2 hours. Calendar, run, back. Run back and connect. And shit, that was not the problem. Hyper JWT. There is no expiration time now. Shit. Something else is wrong. Something else is wrong. Okay, from the whole code base, APIs, access, APIs. Yep. Game run. Game run. We are using game run, which is built on top of game create plugin, which oh shit. Okay. Is user queue. Makes sense. Makes sense. Button back and cool. Now we do have a connection. Cool. Okay. Okay, so our one user is connected here, and we here get the message. User 42 wants to play game as random. If we log in as user 37, get the token, which is this, and make a connection. We have a connection, not yet. And we say that the color that we want to play with is 0. We should be able to connect. We are not able to connect. 404. Why? Because this is not create. This is run. Okay, run and params we can just okay. We do have a connection, and we got in return that the color of the current player is 0 and the game has started. And here also we got starting a game between user 37 as white and user 42 as black. Okay, shit. Why is you user 37 wanted to play the game as black, but we started the game with user 37 as white, even though user 37 wanted to play as black. That is wrong. Here. Okay, that is wrong. White player is the current player currently who do black. Okay, and then we increase our random count. Response opponent response dot color type. Yes, random count. If random count is 0, that is no one is random then, but that is not the case. At least someone is random. And if the current player is random, which the current player is not, then you have to check the other player. Okay, if the current player is, there is only one random count and it is the current player who is random. In that case, if the current player is random, then if the opponent wants to play as white, we will switch the colors. Which is not the case. Yep. But if the current player is not random but is black, then we will change the cards. We will make the current player black and the opponent player white. Here the opponent current is 37 and he is black. Black socket. Okay, shit. Okay. The only mistake is in the username here. Shit. The sockets are okay. The sockets are okay. Whites socket dot dot username. Property user does not exist on empty. It might be existing. Okay, we also need white player and the other player's username. White username is current player dot username and black user name would be opponent response dot opponent dot username. And whenever we are switching these, we will also switch black username is white username and white username is black username. Is there a swap function? Swap function in JavaScript? Shit. Okay. There is temporary. This is classic, but this is modern and concise here. So we will use this black username, comma white username is white username, comma black username, and that works. And we can make this concise also. Black socket, comma white socket equals white socket black socket. Cool. paste, copy, and paste. Okay, and here white username for the white player and black username for the black player. White username and black username for the corresponding layers. Okay. Make a connection using this user connected and using this user. Okay. User 37 wanted to play as black and user 42 wanted to play as random. 42 is now playing as white and 37 is playing as black, and the game is going on. Now, if one of the, and they also got this message that the start is true and color for this user is 1 and for the other one is 0. And if one of them stops, then the other one will get a message that you won the game. This one, shit, this one didn't get any message at all. Shit. Okay. Debugging. Console.log, user name, close connection, mid game as color and as color. Color is here, 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 color is here. Color type as color type, and name of the opponent user. Name of the opponent user would be opponent socket, which we do not know. Opponent socket dot user dot data dot, yeah, user does not exist. Even though it does, but it does not exist here. So if we go to a place to get a socket with where user does exist in the data section, like here, what is the type of this thing? Big type. This thing has a big type. Okay, let's say we'll just print the user ID. And who has won the game? Opponent ID have won the game. Shit, yes, we have called remove this and data dot set user socket ID and also set them as opponents. Yep. Or we can write a function. We cannot write a function. Writing a function would not be cool. User set user ID socket. Set user ID socket. Take user ID and the socket. Expected 3 arguments. Color and data dot set user ID socket color type dot white for user ID. Instead of WS, we will here say white socket And Shirva, yes, user ID. The current user is the white person. No, the current user is not the white person. We do not know who is the white person. We need to have another thing here. Let white user ID. User ID and let black user ID is opponent response dot opponent dot user ID. And in case we do switch something, black user ID comma white user ID equals white user ID and black user ID. Cool. So we know the user IDs also. White user ID, black user ID, black socket, and color type. uh, black. Cool. Okay. Also, what if there is no one who currently wants to play? So there is only a single user. How matchmaking handled then? If there is no user who wants to play a certain game, then you just sit there waiting why till there comes some other user who also wants to play the game as you with the same settings as you want to play. Yeah, that would be a problem. That would be a problem. I cannot add. Bots can be added later on. Bots can be added later on. Bots can be added later on. If someone wants to play as a bot, with a bot, not as a bot. Okay. Set, and then data dot set user ID. What else do we have to set in memory? User ID. Yep, we have already set user ID. Set as opponents. Okay, yes. Add user game. No, as user playing. Remove game is user queue. Print. Get user opponent. This thing. Add user game. No. Set user opponent. Set user opponent. This function takes in uh, set user opponent, white user ID, and black user ID, and cool. I think that is enough. That is enough. Remove them from the queue, add them to the list of users who are playing a game. Start, okay. Start socket. Start socket. Now, starting a game between 42 as white and 37 as black. And if we stop one connection, both of them have closed their connections. That is good. And the other user got a message. Game ended, true, winner, true. Winner true means the person who is receiving this message is the winner. So, okay, we at least have some common grounds here. Cool. Cool. Now we can finally work on this. And my keyboard is acting wonky. We can think about game logic. If a socket sends a move, we first have to check, is this player playing a game? Okay, if this player is playing a game, then we can get through mechanisms the WebSocket of the other player. That is cool. We can also get the user ID of that other player. Yep, we can get the user ID of that other player. We can get the user ID of that other player. Okay, there are going to be some things that we need to check for. We can get the current, yes, other player. Okay, so we have two players. Then, okay, I can use skill draw. Okay, our server was like happy, and it had several WebSockets. One of them randomly came up and sent an object which looks like this, which says move, and the move consists of two things: the original square, which would be e2, and the target square, e4. So let's say this was the move sent by a player. Then server sees this. Server then checks, is this player playing a game right now? There are going to be a few checks. Let's write them down. Number one is player playing. Cool. Then second, get opponent ID. Cool. Then get opponent socket. Cool. Now we have the opponent ID, we have the opponent socket, and we do know that these two players are playing a game. Then we have to know whose chance was this right now. Yep. Whose chance was this right now? Do we have mutex? We yes, like there are no threads, so there would no, yeah, it does not have built-in native mutex. Why would this have mutex? So there is going to be an object which will be checked, and on check that object will contain the information about whose move is is it right now. Yep, whose move is it right now, and whose move. This is a very big general abstract statement. Whose move. Then we can move on. If we do know somehow whose move this is, then we will validate move. We need to have a game object, in memory game object, which has the like information about all the chess pieces which are on the board, which checks this move. Is this move valid? Okay, shit. Admin what? Okay. Shit, you are very good at chess. I forgot. Through move number. But yes. Shit. Yes, 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 yes. That is cool. That is cool. That is cool. That is cool. Through move number. Through move number. Since you already know the color of the players, which is fixed and not changing. Through move number. If it is a odd move, then it is white player, and if it is a even move, then it is the black player. Cool, cool. That makes sense. That makes sense. Thank you for the suggestion. That is cool. That is what will happen here. You can validate by reading the code. Why comment not going? Uh, I guess you can make a PR here. And by the way, yeah. So yeah, this is cool. Okay. Whose move? This will be checked by move number, and we need to have an in-memory object which contains. I said same. Should you? I said same. Okay, you said this thing. Okay, and we need to have an in-memory object. which will contain the location of all the pieces. Yep. And so it will have right now what the board looks like right now, wherever all the pieces are. This is exactly how chessboard looks like, and it will take the move and check is this move possible, where here we have the source square and the target square, source to target. And by the way, this is not displaying. I said odd for white and even for black. Yep, odd for white and even for black. By the way, this format of showing a move where a move is a combination of two squares. First is the source square and second is the target square. This was suggested by Modular from Discord. Yep, he came up with this, and this is pretty cool. This removes all ambiguity. We know exactly which piece moved and we know exactly where it moved. So yep, we will have a in-memory object and we will check is this move valid. And if it is, then whatever the function is which checks the validity of a move, that will return true, otherwise it will return false. And if the move is possible, well, okay, after validating a move, if possible, then if possible, tell other player and tell the current player that okay, your move is accepted, don't cry, and tell the other player and tell the current player and update game state, right? But if not possible, then abuse the current player for sending a wrong move, because we will have checks on the front end to make sure that an invalid move is not being sent. But it's still, if invalid move is being sent, that just means that the player is trying to hack, and in that case you can just abuse, no questions. How they send move? They send move. This will be complicated, bro. Making all the possible moves for each piece and checking. No, no, no. We will not be making all possible moves. We will just be checking, is this current move which has been sent by the player, is this correct or not? And let me show you how they will send the move. They will send the move like this. Console.log. Uh, move message. Is this okay? Console.log message, and the list send move receive start connect connect. And from here we can send message. Let's say move is e2 yes, e2 to e4 from the white player. Move received by the server, this message was sent, and on the server we saw move e2 to e4. Yep, cool, right? Like how they send typing, using the WebSocket. Through the WebSocket on the front end, they will like have their UI to do the thing. And shit, front end is going to be difficult, like uh because in front end you need the ability to click on a thing, drag it over to some other square and leave it there, and that will be considered as a move. Shit, front end is going to be difficult. This itself is going to be difficult, this thing right here. And look at this, right now there is a game playing going on, and if one of them leaves, this player left, other player got a message, ended true, winner true. So that is cool. I saw someone made this thing in terminal using shit. In terminal TY. That is messed up. Yeah, but I guess over time we will also be able to do this. We just have to give it a bit of time. There also that they have to type the moves like no, they do not have to type the move. The front end will provide them with the correct interface. The front end will be calling these APIs under the hood, but from the user's perspective, they are just clicking somewhere and doing stuff. Like if I were to, okay, this front end right here, this is a website, and if English to German swap Hamnet, if I click on this, then from my point of view, I just clicked on Hamnet and everything just worked out. I got Hamnet movie and details about it. Seems like a good movie. 8 rating is good. 8 is pretty good. Pretty good. And yeah, but under the hood, the front end took this word, made an API request, got data from the backend and showed it to me. Yep, they will be connected. And this is cool. This is cool. Hamlet is good. Shakespeare's son. Okay, this is tough. Shit. Get opponent ID. Is player playing? Easy to check. Get socket and pose move. Okay, now we have to decide on the in-memory object which is going to represent the whole game. How is that object going to look like? Shit. How is that object going to look like? It will have a, I guess, thing called board. Okay, let's do this. Levies inside memory. This should not be named memory. This should be named pre-game or during the game memory. Shit, what should be the name of this class? Anyways, whatever is the name of this class. This thing extends base class and yep, this is a function that takes in a base class, extends the base class, and return this. And this is also a function which takes in base class, extends it, and returns it, which are collectively being imported here. Collectively being imported here and being extended by each other. Game.ts. Let's see this and game. This game. Game is declared but never used. Game. What do we do? This is going to have a memory object which is static. Game list. Either we collectively store all the game objects in a single list or map or something, some data structure, and find the game object of the current game and make changes to that, or we store the game object with the WebSocket, which does not make sense. Yeah, we will have to do this. We will have to store them collectively and then find the game object and then make updates to that instead of some other method. Okay, and what is the game object looking to look like? Static game list interface game dot where are all these things, all these objects. They are in interfaces.ts. Where is this file? Inside helper. Okay, inside helper we have interfaces.ts, and here inside interface we have interfaces. Okay, that is a bit messed up. Inside helper we have inter. We do not have interfaces. Interfaces.ts. This is inside database. Okay, cool. Inside database we have interfaces.ts because these have to do with the database. Okay, we can add our another interface here. Game game object, for which we have to change this game object. How do we do that? Uh, yeah, game object is not the right name here. Does not look like the right name here. Game object, because we thought that we would be sending this game object to every place, but we are not going to send this game object to every place. I think there is a lot of refactoring that we can do. Here we are adding add game, and then we are removing. We are not doing anything else. We are doing something else. We are here calling get opponent, which is internally calling get game. Shit, get game again. The name is not right. Get game is game. Shit, these names are very bad. These names are very bad. These names are very bad. Get game is game because they do not have to do with the game, with the actual game. They are only getting objects before the game. Pre-game objects. Shit. How long? 1 hour 38 minutes. Phone is not charging. Still. Okay. Cool. It is charging. Pre-game objects get its shit. We have to change everything again. Everything again. We have to change everything again. Shit. Get status. Get add. Commit. Message. Feature added. Surround game logics. Get push storage in main. Okay. We will update this. We'll update this. Game object queue. Game object. Game object as user ID. WS. Who is ever okay? Yes, this is being used. We just have to change the name. We just have to change the name. When we are getting the opponent, this is being used at that time. Yep. We just have to change the names. And game queue get game queue remove game queue. That is a nice name already. Good enough. Is game queue which was being called there. Fine. Here also. Okay, and anything else? Is game queue add game queue get game queue remove game queue is user in queue print get user. Now here things must have been broken. Okay, now everything is okay here because things have broken in this function. Get opponent, get game, game. Okay, and I hope nothing has broken. Everything up to date. One button back, Java server, backend, connect, connected, connect, connected. A game is started, end game for one user, and the other one builds. That is messed up. That is messed up. Not as random. We also have to change the color. We also have to change the color. Get opponent color. Yes. Set user ID socket. Color type. Color. Color. What is color? Color is being fixed from here. So this should not be random. Socket dot close. Socket dot close. Remove everything and then close the socket. Makes sense. Opponent, yep, remove everything and then close the socket. And also we have to update the color. If we do get here, get user color for user cannot assign to color because it is a constant. Const current color. It is not available here inside. Okay, we would like to change that. Now we can change the color. Null, it could be null. This could be null. If this thing is true, that works, yeah. If this thing is true, then this is returned. Otherwise, this color is returned and bundle back. Start, start, close. This person got the message that they have won, and we only have one thing here. Cool, cool, cool. Now the game state. Yes, we have changed the name. Functions. Okay. Game object. Game queue. Game object. Queue. Game queue object. Game queue object. Queue object and places where this was imported. Game queue object. So thing game queue game object queue, which apparently does not exist. Game object game game queue and game object queue. Game object queue is fine, but game queue is not fine. So substitute game set, but not everywhere. Here, go to the word, insert game object, remove game queue. Has no export game queue. Why are there no exports? Named game queue from interfaces. Game queue object is the right thing to do. Game queue object. Game queue object. Another error. Game queue object. And one more error somewhere. Game queue object. Okay, okay, that looks good. Restart. Stop. Cool, and there was no error. Cool. I would like to add another log statement here. Right here. This closed connection mid-game as this, and opponent. Who is opponent? Opponent is we do not know the opponent's name. How can we know it? We cannot know it. So we can just print this later on. There is one error somewhere. Game object. Game queue object. Game Q object. Is there? Yep, only the name was changed, so everything is okay. Connect, connect, disconnect. Yep, everything is going fine here. Sit down. Interface, explode game. Let's see, is there any game object? There's game object Q. Then there is game object. There is game object and find opponent file. Okay. Game object. Game Q object. Game Q object. And now game object. This is fine. Return game object. Okay. This is just the internal name. Game Q object. Game Q object. Just to be consistent. Game object. Game object fine. Game object fine. Game object map. Game object map. Substitute game object with game Q object. Game object. Here it is okay. Add game Q here again. This is not okay. Game object is there, and here substitute game object with game Q object. Game object Q okay here. Game object Q okay here. Game object Q is okay here. Cool. Now we can finally write the interface for game object. Let's code interface game object. How is a game object going to look like? How is a game object going to look like? Yep. It will have a board. Yep. Uh, move number, which is going to be a number. Let's say dummy type. Move number, board, move number, user ID, white user ID, black user ID. Yes, white user ID, string, black user ID, string. These commas are not required, it seems. White user ID and black user ID. Move number, board is finished. I think this is enough. This is enough. We just have to decide how board is going to look like. This looks okay. How is the board going to look like? Yo, hello. How is it going? And shit, I don't think I will be able to stream for 3 hours. I have to now we have to make some creative decisions. How is the good board going to look like internally? About which I'm not the expert. So the other people who are working on this project, I will consult them today in the evening, and I will have to ask them, consult with them, what the board should look like, because there are multiple ways. What we essentially want is the position of pieces to be known in some format. So either we shit, how are we going to store the board? We could store the board. And also we also have to keep in mind that however the board is going to be stored, we also have to validate the move afterwards. After looking at the board, we also have to validate the move, because if we store this as just a 2D matrix of pieces, and yeah, as a 2D matrix where we have, let's say, a rook, b, rook, black rook, and stuff like that filled here, and then we get our move, and our move says that there was a piece here which should move to this place here, right? Using this board, it is pretty easy to check, is there a piece here, and is there a empty space here or capturable piece here? It is easy to check, but how are we going to validate other rules which might be breaking? I think it is okay. It is okay. The what could be the other rules? The other rules could be, are there any pieces in between? Which would only be checked if the current piece is not ours, right? And since we have this information, we can look here and we can find out what the piece here is. So we can even see, is this diagonal or forward or left or right movement, is this movement even possible by this piece? Which is easy to check by a board like this, a matrix board like this. It is easy to check. And yep, it is also easy to check using this matrix kind of board whether there are pieces in the middle or not. Yep, that is easy to check. And what are the other rules? The move should be valid by the move should be valid by the piece. There should not be any other pieces in the middle. And there are then edge cases like castling. Should How are you going to say castle? We will give the king's position. King moves two places. Shouldn't the Instead of, it is going to be the logic on both the sides, front end and back end. How I would have done it from my limited web dev knowledge, I would only do the storing and matching part on backend. The rest of the validation and process of proper board and pieces would be done. Wait, what? The rest of the validation and process representation of proper board pieces would be done on the front end. Yes, representation of board would be done on the front end, but how would storing storing. Yep. You do need to store pieces on the backend, and matching part. Validation. No, you do have to do validation on the backend because the player on the front end could maybe hack your front end and get access to the raw socket, using which you are connected to the backend, and the player could send malicious requests. So there have to be two validations on the front end and also on the back end. On the front end so that the user is not making illegal moves, and also on the back end so that if the user is a hacker, like a pro person hacker, and they get access to the WebSocket and are sending illegal moves, then also the backend holds. Yep, matchmaking is on the back end, but validation also has to be on the back end, both on the back end and the front end. Sanitizer. And shit, since this thing is required by the front end and the back end both, this should be a common function. And what should the signature of this function look like? This will of course take in the move, and this will take in the board. So this is cool. The board, shit, that is cool. Therefore, the board should be a thing which is common. Yep. The board interface and this function should be accessible by both the front end and the back end. Cool, cool. Both the front end and the back end interfaces, game, object, game documents, let's say. Export, interface, board. What is the board going to look like? Board is going to be a 2D matrix of 64 by 64, 8 by 8 squares. Either a 2D matrix or a singular matrix of a singular linear matrix of 64 squares. Because if you are hosting this on Vercel, the more backend logic you keep, the more charges would it cause. The more backend logic you keep. Wait, this argument is correct if I want to reduce the cost, but if the user is a hacker, they will be able to send invalid moves, which must be handled on backend. Just using uint int 64 bits. How? 0 for where the bees are, but you need more information than just knowing is there a piece on this square or not. You need to know what the color of that piece is and also what the piece is. Is it a rook and which color rook? So, yeah. And I using a string would be a overkill. Enum would be good. Enum would be good. Enum would be good for this. So basically, 2 to 3 unit depending on how you do. No, this uint would not work here, and we need enum. Export enum. This is how not um, pieces. Okay, what are the pieces? White rook, white bishop, no, white knight, knight, white bishop, white mm, king, white queen, and then black rook, black knight, and also white pawn, white b. Substitute w with b, pr, maybe like this. Okay. These are the pieces using an enum. This is cool. This is cool. The piece type would matter. Yep, it would matter. Board and also null piece. And end, like nothing. Or not known at November and end. Nothing. Okay. So the board would be a 8 by 8 matrix. Now we have to decide there is it going to be a 2D matrix of 8 by 8, 8 columns by 8 rows, or a 1D matrix? Yeah, 2D matrix would be easier to work with. How do we say array? My keyboard actually is working bad. Type board equals array of array of 8. Yep, I don't know. See, define a to the array of 8 x 8 of number in TS. Or like, yeah, how to define the type of it. Shit, that was easy enough. Number, not number, pieces, 8. Why can we not fix property? It does not exist on pieces. Wouldn't a 2-byte representation be more useful? Like in white king, WR for this, and enums would be at least this two wait, enums would be at least 4 bytes. Okay, just flatten it out. 2D matrix would be hard to optimize for cache. This, bro, I am writing in JavaScript, right? We are writing in JavaScript here. So if it is 4 bytes or 2 bytes, it does not actually matter on the web, I guess. Yeah, on the web, it does not matter. Either you are using 4 byte or 8 bytes. How do we define this? Shit. Okay, how does ChatGPT know that we are doing chess? Cool. Or we could do this. Strict 8 by 8. Okay, for a strict 8 by 8, we will have to do this manually like this. Fine. A row is pieces, pieces. That is a row. And both, which we are going to expose, is row, row. Is this 8 by 8? 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Is there not a better way to do this? Better way to, is there not a better way to say that board, that a board must have 8 by 8 matrix? Must be a 8 by 8 matrix. Yep, this is JavaScript. Yeah. And I did some cleanup of the okay, shit. You uh my bad, I forgot what the what your backend was doing. It was doing some transcoding. And then remember that I still had not embedded the lookup table. Okay, C code for your VM, the lookup table in the binary. So now I had to go back to parsing again. Like, I don't know what is a lookup table. My best guess is that from a lookup table, you have your symbols and you get the code from, yeah. So, like, yeah, you have the symbols, and from those symbols, you get the relevant piece of data, either code or data, which is like having the variable name and then finding either its value or the function that this variable is. Real world, generic, fixed length, pupil. Shit, that is messed up. Fixed length array. Okay, that we do this. What is actually happening? Nah, this is fine. This is fine. We will also need some functions, not a file, but directory. Yes. Game game.ts interface functions and delete this game.ts here import board. First we have to save this board, import board and cons get or net board. Doesn't take in anything, just initializes a board. Not const let board of type board equals how, like what is it? Must be imported as type. What is board is declared, but its value is never read. Wait, is it initialized? Board is used before being assigned. Yes, we have assigned this. It is only being declared right now. Okay. Wait, shit. Okay, there has been a lot. And remember that I still have embedded. Okay, now I more or less understand why better assembly is much better. Why assembly is written the way it is written. That is very good for you. Like the data section of binary is for data. Like suppose you want to print a string, but the size of each register is fixed, so you cannot load more than a certain length of string in it. Yep. So how do you print hundreds of lines if you must by character, I think. So for that, you store the string on a separable memory address at a different location on your binary. Location on your binary. What does on your binary mean? Binary on your data section of binary. Okay. And then load that memory or location on the register. That is what lookup table or symbol table does. Yep. You bring the characters character by character or like as much as you can and print them one by one. How do we initialize this? New array of pieces and shit. How do we given the size? Initialize a new array. How to initialize a new array? New array in JavaScript. Yes, very professional question. New array like this, we could even either give this creates array of length 3. So length comes inside 8, but not pieces, not pieces, but how to initialize such an array. How do we initialize such an array? Fixed length array. That is just the type. Create board pieces initial board return array dot from length 8. Make an array from this. Give length 8. Length of the array should be 8, and a function which will be called, which returns this, and internally, okay. Array dot from, array dot from async, array dot from. Make an array from this. Give the length to be 8. Magic numbers. We should not use magic numbers. Interfaces. But is this a magic number? I think. Remember, please. Import pieces. Pieces is an enum. Magic numbers. Constants dot is const row size 8. Just in case someday we want to change the size of our board. Row size. Row size, column size. They were not being exported. Game.ts. Not length. Row size and a function weight and a function which returns array dot count length row size column size and a function that returns pieces dot content. Declares locally, but it is not exported. Shit, pieces is not exported. That is sad. That is. Sure. Okay. Makes sense. So why are we importing it? Makes sense. Import pieces from the correct file and board type and list is not assignable to type board, which requires at least 8 argument. Exactly, 8 argument. Okay, so shit, okay, can't delete it itself. Tell the rest of from basically, and the comment was deleted. Okay, 40 more minutes. No, I guess I would actually like to take a rest now. Restoring chat. Yep. 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 I'll continue this after some time. I want to like take a walk now, and that would be it for today. Yeah, that would be it for today. And we'll see. I plan to finish the backend this week. That would be cool. And thank you for being here. Bye.